Hi everybody, welcome to this very short Maya tutorial on lighting and rendering. So we're going to be looking at this very briefly. So remember from our last time we added this sky dome to our scene and that created the light, and you can see here that when I click on this sky dome I have an intensity and a color, so I can actually I've set my color to be the same as the to be this image. I've set the intensity to be 1, which is just the default intensity. So I can reduce that to make it less light or more light. So if I bump this light right up and I press the render button, this thing is going to just be bright. As you can see, way too bright. And I'm not going to do the opposite because I think you get the idea. If I put it down low, it's going to be really dark. But what I am going to do is I'm going to put this at about 0.5. Okay. So what this does is it creates a very circular light. It creates a light from all directions and you get a very even light across everything, which isn't the most dynamic looking light. It's not the best looking light that you can ever come up with. So we have these other lights here. We have 2 sets of lights. We have them in the rendering tab. So we have a bunch of lights here, and we also have them in the Arnold tab. So we have some lights here. Okay, so we're just going to look at the basic ones we're going to look at a couple of basic lights and then we're going to render out our scene. So I'm going to choose in the basic lights, back in rendering tab, I'm going to choose this one here. This is a point light. Oh, sorry, this one here. The third one is a point light. Ambient light doesn't really work in Arnold, so the point light is light coming from a single point. So for example, a light globe would be an example of a point light because it's coming from, the light is all coming from one point and going out in every direction. So it's kind of the opposite to the light we've got here that's going inwards. We've got an outwards kind of light. So I can move this over here. I'll create a point light by clicking it. We can see a little icon for our light, and this is just an object like everything else. You'll be able to see it in the outliner, etc, etc. So if I create a light here, I'm going to create a light right in the middle of this spring here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to ramp up its intensity. So you can see here, instead of intensity, for the Arnold renderer, we make sure to click on this Arnold tab. And this is very important for Arnold because it's a physics-based renderer and it makes everything a little bit more detailed. So we have this exposure as well. So the exposure is really the one that makes difference. So if I put this up to, say, for example, 5, this is going to have a significant effect on the scene. So if I press render, so immediately you can see that this has a stronger 3-dimensionality look to it. We have some more shadows around here. We have shadows around here. We have highlights. You can see the shadow of the spring. You can sort of see the dark light contrast. Immediately, as we start to add lights in, we have a far more interesting scene. Okay, so to keep this tutorial short, there's a whole range of these lights here. We have like a spotlight and whatnot. The other light we're going to have a look at is in the Arnold renderer. So we've had a look at this create sky dome light, which I've turned down so it's not having such an effect. The other light we want to have a look at is the area light, the one on the left here. And that's just light coming from a plane or a circle. So I'm going to click on that. And you can see here, I've got a little object. And it's got a little it's got a little green point. And that's the way that the light is traveling. So basically, light is going to be coming out of this entire surface. And it's going to be going in the direction that it's pointing. So I'm going to move this over here and point it down. But because it's only a small surface, it's only going to have a small effect. So the first thing I want to do is scale this way up. So the bigger the surface area, the more effect it's going to have. Yep. So we're going to have a bit more interesting lighting here. And we're not going to go into anything too detailed with this. And what I'm also going to do is this one, because this one's a Arnold light, straight away you can see the exposure, and this is the important one here. So I'm going to crank this up to, say, 5 or even higher. We could put that at, say, 7. So we're going to have a good exposure to it. Once again, you can change attributes, but this is a very simple tutorial for lights. I'm going to render this now, and we're going to have a bit more of an interesting scene here. And I might even just move this point light over to the other side here to cast some light from different directions. So let's have a look at that. So actually I might put it right around here. I might spin the whole scene around to say there. We'll see if we can get some more interesting looking shadows and whatnot. Now I press the render button. And as you can see here, we have once again a bit more of an interesting scene. We've got these hard shadows along here. We've got these nice highlights in here. This bit in the middle is probably blown out a little bit. That blown out meaning that the light's too intense in that section. So we can play around with that. And also just over here. So a good thing to do is to add a few lights from a few different sources. If you feel like looking up a thing called 3-point lighting, that is a very good effect. And you can get some really interesting looks, especially these metallic reflective objects. I think they look really fantastic with some lights on them. And the floor looks a bit more realistic, a little bit more, as you get shadows cast on it, you've got a lot more going on here. All right, so the last thing we're going to have a look at is just the render settings and saving a render. So all you need to do here is next to our render button, to the right of that, we have our render settings. It's got a little cogwheel. Anything with settings typically got a cogwheel. And that's going to bring up a little dialogue. Well, it's a giant dialogue in this case, but okay. And all you need to do here is set up a couple of parameters. So if you roll down to where it says image size, we can set that to, for example, 1024. Which is 1024/768, or we can set that to a whole range of preset 1080p, so 1920 1080, or you can just type it in any value you want. So I think 1080p is pretty good, or even 720, HD 720 is good. I think that'll probably be as high as we want to go. It tells you which camera you want to use. In this case, we'll just be using perspective, and so I think that's all we need to change. We don't need to go into anything too fancy with that. And the last thing we need to do is press render. So we click on the old render button. And this is rendering out the exact same image. And this is slow. I paused it the last 2 times, so you'll see it a bit slow. But this is the exact same image, but it's higher resolution, meaning there's more pixels in that image, so we can do a lot more with it afterwards. So we can take it into Photoshop or anything like that. So I'm going to pause this so you don't have to watch this whole thing painfully slowly render, and I'm going to show you how to save. Okay, so here you have it. We have our larger render. So we've rendered to 720 pixels high by 1280 pixels wide, which is the exact size of this recording, as you can see. So we have more detail, exactly the same picture though. And up here we have the file button. Make sure you don't click on this or that'll re-render it and you'll have to go through that same process again. So click on File and Save Image. And we can click on, anytime we see this little box here, as you know, there's some attributes for that, but just click on Save Image. All right. And then we have files of type, and I've got a whole range of file types here, but I'm just going to save JPEG, which is a very standard format of image, and click on it, give that a file name, save it to your desktop is probably a safe place for now, or if you have a folder, save it to your desktop, and then you'll have that file saved. So I'll just call this render, and I'll save as render.jpg. So you'd probably give yours a more specific name, like spaceship render or something like that. Press save, and then you have saved your file. So because our files are very large, this would be one way that you could hand in your file. You could just send me a few renders of your scene. So that's definitely something you can consider if you're having trouble sending your large Maya files across. That concludes this lesson. Thank you very much.